Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My guest is Clifton Kinnie from Ferguson, Missouri. Clifton, thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Okay, so you're a graduate of Lutheran North High School, or Lutheran High School North?
Lutheran High School North, actually.
In Ferguson. You've been involved in, of course, the protests, a lot of national attention when Michael Brown was killed, obviously in Ferguson. And by the way, congratulations. You received full scholarships to both Morehouse and
Howard University.
Howard University. I know you got and you decided to go to Howard. Before we talk about kind of the key stuff, how do you decide on Howard? I'm kind of curious about that. Great institution, by the way.
Great question, man. And thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, as you know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went to Morehouse College. So when I visited Morehouse, there was a lot of comments, these expectations that, hey, Cliff, you need to be just like Dr. King. You need to live up to him. And I was taken aback by that.
That expectation.
Well, not the expectation, but just the idea that I would have to live in the legacy of one of the greats, which it's not really a problem, but I sort of, as in this movement, really, we just sort of, it's my own path, really. Right. And I visited Howard University and I fell in love, and just the idea that many of the students there, lead movements and want to bring about social change.
Right. And I want to talk about what you've done in Ferguson. Launching Our Destiny STL, for example. Tell me about that, and how did you get involved as a protest organizer in Ferguson? I mean, and as a relatively young man.
Well, I and so many other young people who have been on the ground in Ferguson find ourselves representing a millennial generation that has been born into a broken world and separated by race, religion, class, and violence. So my initial start in the protest movement happened on August 9th. Before August 9th, I had lost my mother to stage 4 breast cancer.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that, by the way. That's terrible.
Yes, sir. So in the midst of dealing with that and a state of depression and anxiety, in the day of August 9th, seeing the body on Twitter, I said enough is enough. So I got out to Canfield Drive and I witnessed the body and the oppression and the aggressiveness from the police force on many in the community who were just trying to mourn and trying to figure out, why is this kid still laying in the street, and why is his body?
Hey, yeah, I understand, man. That's tough.
And
well, the answer to the question is there's no excuse. There was no excuse.
No excuse whatsoever.
Yeah, but it also epitomizes what's wrong in this country. So tell me about that. So what was your reaction? I mean, you were out there. Yeah, I mean, and many people were.
It was, yes, many other people and myself. It was unbelievable that something like that could happen, right?
And not just what happened, but the treatment afterwards.
The over-aggressiveness from the police, who are supposed to be the guardians of the community, and instead of the guardians, they have become the oppressors. And that's not a new issue. Police violence and state violence has always been very apparent in the black community for over decades, centuries, really, if you want to argue that.
But isn't it fair to say most white people aren't aware of that?
I think it's relevant to say that most white people aren't aware of that.
I mean, certainly in the last year, they've become more aware of it. Right.
And part of the reason why they weren't really aware of it is due to privilege at first, and the fact of segregation and poverty. So back initially to my organizing in the movement. So as days followed after we built the memorial, we were out there on West Florissant, or Ground Zero. See, it's not normal to name one of your streets after a military term, but Ground Zero, we were protesting. I was with several other young students, and I was actually tear gassed and hit with rubber bullets on August 12th. So that day, during the day, of course, the police were bucking their chests out. They had their clubs and their shields. It was just a wild scene, something you would see from like Palestine or Gaza, right? Not modern day America in 2015, or even in St. Louis, really. And so as the night came through, things would get really crazy. And the officers They wouldn't give any warnings. They would just start shooting tear gas and rubber bullets. Now, I didn't know it was tear gas at first. I didn't even know how to deal with tear gas. I shouldn't have to. No one should have to, especially young people. And so there was a young girl in the middle of the street as they began shooting the tear gas near the Quick Trip that had burned down. And everyone else was running. They were dispersing, running. And this young girl, she's in a state of shock, standing in the middle of West Florissant. So my initial reaction was I could either run like everyone else, or I could go get her and get her to safety. So I grabbed her out of the street. I handed her to another young woman and told them to get out, but it was too late for me. So as the canisters began to surround me, you know, I thought it was smoke at first. So my initial reaction was, okay, just get on the ground, cover your nose, you know, what they teach you in elementary school.
In school, yeah.
When fires happen. So it turned out not to be smoke. It was tear gas. And the gas immediately began filling my insides, my lungs. I began coughing, throwing up blood. And it was really painful. And I had tears coming from my eyes. But it wasn't tears because of the pain. It was tears because of the unbelief, the disbelief that I had trusted this system for many years. You know, I was 17 at the time. I'm taught in school that police are supposed to be my friend, they're supposed to serve and protect me, and that wasn't the case at the time. So I started school days later and going.
Well, how did you get out of that situation, just physically? I mean, what
physically
happened? Yeah, I mean.
So after the tear gas had cleared, you know, I had gotten out of there. I got in my truck and I drove home, and I was out of it, man. I was out of it. And school followed days later. And I would protest every day up to 5:30 a.m. in the morning. So imagine how I felt on my first day of school. So I would go into school, and there was no mention of Ferguson whatsoever, despite the fact.
Really?
Yeah, despite the fact that my school was literally around the corner from Ground Zero, like 2-minute walking distance. And so when the teacher would start teaching us about, you know, civics and importance of voting and how the education system works so well. And I'm just sitting there like distraught because there's a war going on around the corner and you're telling me the system still works. And that's when I really said enough is enough. And I noticed that many other students around me and in other schools wanted to get involved in the movement. They just didn't know how. So I immediately sent out a text message to about 20 of my friends from various other schools. And I said, okay, 20 of y'all, come to my house, let's meet, let's talk, let's find out how to do something. So 20 students came. You know, it was cool. I closed my doors. We were in the backyard chilling. And then 30 more students came, and then 50, and then 100, then 200, then 300. Then you had 500 angry black students in the backyard, you know, angry, justifiably angry because of the injustice happening against them. And they wanted to figure out what to do. So you had all this potential, and we had to figure out how to utilize it in the best way. So studying what SNCC did back in the original civil rights movement, you know, we set up a young students coalition of high school students, and we hit the ground running. Really, we did protests inside and outside of schools. We did community service, youth voter registration drives. The list could go on. And I applaud many of the young high schoolers that are still down on the ground right now, like Maya Petty, who's from Parkway High School, and Jacquees Webb, who's from McClure. You know, phenomenal young organizers, and I salute them. And
so
many others.
That's an amazing start. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with Clifton in just a moment.
And in general, black people are not allowed to feel. We're not allowed to feel anger or distraught with the system. We're told whenever a traumatizing situation like Ferguson or Baltimore happens, or what happened in Charleston, that we're supposed to get straight to the healing process, when that's not realistic.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. For information about the program, who our upcoming guests and topics are, and ways you can participate, please go to our website. That's harbertv.com. And most of all, thanks for watching.
I'm Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron, Director of Avatar.
I'm Christina Johnson, former Undersecretary of Energy.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I'm the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show.
I would encourage you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. It's good fun.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show because he's a really cool guy.
Please watch the Aaron Harber Show, on which I do appear.
I want you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. Grimmy watches it every day.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Clifton Kinnie from Ferguson, Missouri. Clifton, one of the things you and I have talked about a little bit off camera is the role the media plays. And I'd be really interested in your take on the media in Ferguson, in the St. Louis area, and also nationally, and the role the media plays in terms of how we live, how we look at each other, how we understand each other.
Good question. Well, society and mainstream media in general attempts to dehumanize black people in any way possible. For example, whenever there's an uprising, they label it as a riot. If you know your definitions, a riot is an act of senseless violence. An uprising is an act of when a group of people realize the system no longer works and they work in any way possible to alter or reform that system. So what happened when mainstream media came to Ferguson was that they labeled black people in general as rioters, as looters, and not people who are mourning and who feel, because despite the burnings of buildings and whatever, these are a group of people who are real human beings, right?
Yeah.
Who have real human feelings. And in general, black people are not allowed to feel. We're not allowed to feel anger or distraught with the system. We're told whenever a traumatizing situation like Ferguson or Baltimore happens, or what happened in Charleston, that we're supposed to get straight to the healing process, when that's not realistic, And in other ways, media biasness, in which whenever a black person is criminalized on TV, they're called a thug, they're called a looter, they're called a crazy person. And whenever a situation when a white person acts in violence, they're then moralized, really. They're justified by, they had mental issues, they were troubled, they put up pictures of Christmas photos, they don't really go into their criminal background. They shed this light that they were this sort of person, this sort of positive person, and that they were just troubled, and that then allows for the justification of their act of violence. When mainstream media really labels people in a really detrimental and negative way, that then allows for further violence to be committed against black people. So what happened in Charleston may have been an act of violence due to the fact that CNN and many other mainstream media have been labeling black people as bad people for the past 10 months and even further back then.
Right, more than 10 months. How do we change that? And have you had any communication with anybody in the media about that? Have you had that opportunity yet?
Great question. Yes, I have. How do we go about changing that? We have to really understand that racism is deeply rooted in America, and it has been deeply rooted in America since the beginning. Racism built America. It has become systematic, it has become institutionalized, and our institutions are our media. They're a part of our institutions. So in order to break that, we have to, how do we really uproot something that has built this country, if you know what I mean? How do we uproot something that
deeply ingrained?
Yes, it's very deeply ingrained. And the way we go about it, there's no one-fit-all solution to any of this. There's going to be a combination of different things. One thing that has to happen is that we have to have honest conversations about race with ourselves, with our friends, with our community, and we have to realize that we never really lived in a post-racial world. And I'm taught that in school. I'm taught that after Martin Luther King marched, he gave his speech, the Civil Rights Act passed, the Fair Housing Act passed, and then everything was okay. Segregation is over, we live in a happy-go-lucky world. When that's sad to say, that's not the truth. I sat in on Ferguson Commission meetings, and St. Louis is overly segregated due to the overly racist policies of real estate agents. So going back to answering your question, we really have to have honest conversations about race.
Well, maybe you can help start some of those.
It
You'll
starts
be,
here.
you'll be in D.C., so
Right.
certainly one of the major media centers. How did the activity of protesting and your involvement being, in the streets, talking to other people, working with other people, how has that affected you personally?
Well, it has affected me and so many other young people on the ground in so many ways possible. All of us have lost friends. We have lost family members. We have literally lost jobs. Our lives have taken a huge turn, really. And it's a choice. You see, no one told us to go protest. We did it because we had to. Because if we didn't fight, who would? So knowing that we had to take on that responsibility, we knew sort of the consequences that would come with that. I've received thousands of death threats. I know many of my friends who've been on the ground who have received thousands of death threats. I'm tired all the time, but I don't really complain. I don't really complain. I do self-care. I also remember that I'm still a young person. I was 17 at the time. I'm 18 now. I'm still a young person, so I have to step back sometimes and relax. But then I got to get back to the work because the work is important. These young people are important. Their voices have to be amplified.
Well, you've obviously changed a lot since Michael Brown was killed. Has Ferguson changed?
Has Ferguson changed? I think, in St. Louis in general, in America in general, there is always going to be this racial divide because due to the fact that we don't live in a post-racial world. Specifically in Ferguson, it has really intensified in a way in which the Ferguson Police Department is still very violent. Many police departments within St. Louis are still very violent, but there's this growing consciousness across the country, across St. Louis, by people on both sides that something needs to get done. It's all about putting our words into actions, and meaningful actions.
What would you like to see changed in Ferguson? If you could make that decision or see one or two things at the top of your list, what would they be?
Great question. In Ferguson, in St. Louis, in America, and throughout the entire world, I really like to see the end of state violence. I really like to see the end to poverty. Well, poverty is really under state violence. State violence, when we think about violence, we just think about guns. When in fact, violence is any form and any of oppression, and our education system in Ferguson and St. Louis is a form of oppression because of its lack of equity and its lack of equality. Our health resources are a form of oppression because of its lack of resources. So violence can be throughout many different forms. I like an end to state violence. It's going to be a long process. It's not going to be easy, as I've realized over the past few months, as I and many others have realized. But due to the fact that this is a youth-led movement and the energy is there, I have so much hope in my community.
All right, well, we're going to take our last break and we'll be right back with Clifton Kinnie.
And it's not anything new, right? Police violence is not anything new. It's just due to the fact of the power of social media and its ability to help amplify our stories and our voices. It's becoming more of a general consciousness that, okay, something is wrong and we have to figure out how to do it.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. We depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's and world's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to allow us to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, please go to dmefd.org. Thanks for watching the show and for your support. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is our final segment with Clifton Kinnie from Ferguson, Missouri, community protest organizer extraordinaire, if I may say. One of the things we were talking about was the concept of change, and often when change is needed, there are people who are really at the forefront, taking risks, putting themselves out there. So I'd like you to talk about people, whether it be in Ferguson, in Missouri, or nationally, that you see as trying to make a difference. Then there are people who fight change, who
Right.
are saying, no, we don't want to see that happen, and who are actively fighting change. And then it seems the vast majority of people seem to be in a state where, well, I don't want to say majority, but a very significant number, they resist change. They're not actively against it, but they're not that enthusiastic about it. What's your experience? And talk about what different people and organizations are doing.
So what we have to understand is that Ferguson has its own local movement going on right now, but there is this sort of national Black Lives Matter movement that is bubbling and really organizing. So back in Ferguson, you have the Don't Shoot Coalition, which entails of over 30 organizations that have sprang up after August 9th to really do the work. And of course, throughout American history, any resistance towards some form of oppression or state violence or racial caste system has been met with those who want to uphold that. Whether that be slavery and the slave owners, Jim Crow and the elite, and so forth. And that's what we're dealing with right now. So our most visible force of opposition is, of course, the police. But then, of course, there's some group behind them, right? That writes the laws, that helps write the laws, and pours money into dismantling movements, really. And that's what we've been up against. But what you've seen in Ferguson is that we've stayed resilient. We've stayed strong throughout the entire past 10 months. We've also faced legislators who are really against what we're doing. Legislators actually in Missouri. So, of course, Missouri is a very conservative state. But even in Staten Island, in New York, and Baltimore, you have members on both sides, the GOP and the Democratic side, who want to get something done. It's something very strange about Missouri, in which, despite that it's conservative run and there's no general consensus in the Missouri legislature that we have to get something done. They might say it on TV, or News Channel 5 at night.
But it's not happening.
It's not happening. But there was, and what I see kind of as the scapegoat right now is that a major bill dealing with the municipal court reform was passed. So there were 100 bills pre-filed in response to the Ferguson movement, and only one major bill passed. So, that's good, that could be bad. I'd like to see a lot more done dealing with, body cameras, racial profiling, changing the use of deadly force. Then again, it's going to be a long process, and we have to continue to organize and, really galvanize and amplify our voices.
How do we better inform the majority of Americans about what's happening?
How do we better inform? Whenever I go speak to someone, I say this joke: don't believe anything you say on the news. Half jokingly, I say that due to the fact of media biasness. How about you come to Ferguson, you go to Baltimore, you go to Staten Island and Oakland and many other cities that have risen up against police violence and state violence in general, and you talk to the people there. You talk to those people who were labeled as thugs and looters and rioters. and you actually get their perspective of what's going on, much like what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And then you go back to your community and you have conversations with your friends, your family. And then I realize everyone can't protest, right? You can't go out there on the front lines and protest in Ferguson. But through your avenue of change, through your profession, it's certain language you use. You know, it's certain stuff you put out there to describe what's happening, you know, and really use your avenue to really bring about change.
Are there, I mean, certainly there are great differences among police forces in this country. I mean, one of the huge challenges is this whole militarization of police forces, where a lot of police departments have been armed to an extraordinary degree in terms of being really combat ready to go overseas. How do you think that's impacted how police conduct themselves? But I also am interested in your take on, there certainly are police departments in this country that are well trained and that are in the communities and are the kind of the ideal that you talked about. But they're certainly not getting much attention.
Right. Well, I think you have to look also at the fact that there is a minority of those sort of police departments and those sort of police forces, and there is a majority of the Ferguson type police departments. Back to the militarization of police forces, we in Ferguson have called for the demilitarization of them, because instead of police taking on the roles of being the guardians of the community, instead they feel as if they are an occupying force. Occupying a community, really, and overseeing that community in a way that's not meant to serve and protect, but meant to oppress. So first of all, I call for I and so many others call for the demilitarization of police forces, and then sort of changing the psychic of many of those officers who look at us as thugs, who look at 4-year-olds as criminals, who can't read and write and are meant to go to prisons, because that really, that is shown throughout their practices, their policing practices. And this whole argument of, oh, it's just a few bad apples, no, those few bad apples are a representation of your whole police department. So it's like eating an apple and you have this rotten spot in there. You don't want to eat that apple because it's rotten, despite that one little spot in there. So, you know, those few bad apples, your whole police department is rotten.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. I mean, police departments also could be viewed like referees. You know, when a referee is doing a good job, you don't notice the referee.
Right.
But when the referee, and you don't notice most police departments. When a referee is doing a bad job, then you're paying attention to the referee. So it would be interesting. I mean, I'm not aware of any studies, but it would be interesting to see, you know, how well trained, how good a job police departments are doing. I think in terms of your point, I think that the challenge is there have been so many departments that have done outrageous things that the image the police are getting today is that it's not just one or two bad apples, the whole barrel is rotten.
Right. And it's not anything new, right? Police violence is not anything new. It's just due to the fact of the power of social media and its ability to help amplify our stories and our voices. It's becoming more of a general consciousness that, okay, something is wrong and we have to figure out how to do it.
All right. Well, I'm confident you're going to help figure that out, Clifton. Thanks so much for joining me, man.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. All right, that was Clifton Kinnie. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.